The gymnasium is full, but the air feels wrong. Rows of white folding chairs face a temporary stage draped in blue polyester. Parents hold phones. Teachers stand near exits with clipboards. The principal, Dr. Lena Voss, watches from the side door with her arms crossed, her expression flat and administrative. She wears a gray suit that looks like policy. Everything is in order, everything is authorized, but something in the room doesn't sit right. The graduates are lined up backstage in their gowns, adjusting caps, whispering last names to confirm the order. Among them is 17-year-old Amara Cole. She stands near the end of the line, one hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the girl in front of her. Her white cane is folded and tucked into the inner pocket of her gown. She's been blind since she was 9. She knows this school by sound, by texture, by the way voices echo off cinder block walls. She knows when people are staring. She knows when silence means something. 3 rows ahead of her, Chelsea Harmon adjusts her honor cords and glances back. Chelsea's mother is on the school board. Her father owns half the commercial real estate downtown. She has never been suspended. She has never been questioned. She moves through the world like someone who has always known which doors will open. Next to her stands Blake Tennyson, captain of the lacrosse team, whose uncle is a county commissioner. He leans toward Chelsea and says something low. She smiles. They both look back at Amara, not with hate, with certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from knowing no one will stop you. Dr. Voss steps into the hallway and pulls out her phone. She scrolls to a message thread from 2 weeks ago, a complaint filed by Amara's father, Marcus Cole. Ignored, not dismissed. Ignored, there's a difference. A dismissal requires a response. Ignoring requires nothing. She slides the phone back into her jacket pocket and returns to her position by the door. The ceremony begins. Names are called. Students cross the stage. Applause rises and falls like a metronome. Amara's name is coming soon. She can hear the alphabet narrowing. Her hand tightens slightly on the shoulder in front of her. The girl shifts forward. Amara takes one step, then another. The line moves. The stage is 20 feet away now. 15, 10. Chelsea Harmon adjusts her tassel. Blake Tennyson cracks his knuckles. Dr. Voss checks her watch. Marcus Cole sits in the back row of the bleachers. He is a big man, broad-shouldered, with graying temples and hands that have seen work. He wears a leather vest over a black shirt. On the back of the vest is a patch, a winged skull, and the words Iron Brotherhood MC. He is not alone. Flanking him on both sides are men in identical vests, 40 of them. They do not cheer, they do not clap. They simply watch, and when Amara's name is called, Marcus Cole leans forward slightly, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the stage. Because he knows what's about to happen, and so do they. 6 months earlier, Amara Cole was not supposed to be a problem. She had transferred to Riverside Preparatory Academy in September, a private school with a waiting list and a campus that looked like a college brochure. Her father had saved for years to afford the tuition. He wanted her to have access, real access, to resources, to teachers who understood accommodations, to a future that wasn't limited by zip code. The school had accepted her application with enthusiasm. They had a diversity initiative. They had a disability services coordinator. They had policies. What they did not have was intention. Within the first week, Amara's accommodations began to disappear, not officially, not on paper, but in practice in the small procedural gaps that no one bothers to document. Her assigned aide, a woman named Mrs. Brennan, was reassigned to another student after 2 weeks. No explanation. When Marcus called the school, he was told it was a staffing issue. Temporary, they would find a replacement. They didn't. Amara learned to navigate the hallways alone, counting doorways, memorizing the texture of lockers, listening for the shift in acoustics that signaled the cafeteria entrance. She learned which teachers would read test questions aloud and which ones would simply place a braille packet on her desk without checking if it matched the actual exam. She learned that asking for help was often treated as an inconvenience, a deviation from procedure. She adapted. She stayed quiet. She earned a 3.8 GPA. She did not complain, but someone noticed her anyway. Chelsea Harmon noticed her in October during a school assembly. Amara had been seated in the front row per her accommodation plan so she could hear the speaker clearly. Chelsea had been assigned to the same row and spent the entire hour whispering to Blake Tennyson about how weird it was that Amara just sat there staring forward like a robot. The word traveled. By November, it had become a game. Small things. A textbook moved 3 inches to the left so Amara's hand would miss it. A chair pulled back just enough. A doorway blocked for 5 seconds, then cleared with an apology that sounded like pity. Nothing you could report, nothing that left a mark. Dr. Lena Voss knew. She had been principal for 11 years. She understood liability. She understood optics. She also understood that Chelsea Harmon's mother, Linda Harmon, had personally donated $75,000 to the school's new athletics wing. She understood that Blake Tennyson's family had connections to the county school board. She understood that Amara Cole's father was a mechanic who rode with a motorcycle club and had no political leverage. So when Marcus Cole submitted a formal complaint in December, citing harassment, lack of accommodations, and a hostile environment, Dr. Voss did what administrators do when they want something to go away without officially rejecting it. She acknowledged receipt. She scheduled a meeting. She rescheduled it. She requested documentation. She requested more documentation. She copied the school's legal counsel on every email, a subtle signal that this was now a procedural matter, not a moral one. She never said no. She simply made yes impossible. By January, Amara had stopped asking for help. She had learned that the system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. It protected those who already had protection. It recorded complaints without acting on them. It created the appearance of process without the burden of accountability. Her teachers liked her. They said she was resilient. They said she was independent. What they meant was, she doesn't make us uncomfortable by needing things. Marcus saw it differently. He saw his daughter coming home later each day, her fingers tracing the edge of her cane like she was checking to make sure it was still there. He saw her eating lunch alone, not because she wanted to, but because the cafeteria was a social field she couldn't navigate without being stepped on. He saw her practicing her graduation speech in the kitchen, her voice steady and clear, and he knew she had already decided to survive this place rather than fight it. But Marcus Cole was not interested in survival. He was interested in records. He began documenting everything. He requested copies of Amara's accommodation plan. He requested the school's incident reports for the fall semester. He requested the names of all staff present during the times Amara had reported issues. He submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to the county. He recorded every phone call. He kept a folder on his kitchen table, organized by date, with tabs labeled policy, procedure, and liability. His brothers from the Iron Brotherhood told him to pull her out, homeschool her, finish the year somewhere else, but Marcus had spent his whole life being told to go somewhere else. He had been told to sit in the back, to keep quiet, to accept that certain doors were not for him. He was not going to teach his daughter that lesson. He was going to teach her the opposite. That you could be blind, black, and working class, and still make them answer for what they did. In February, something changed. Amara had been assigned a group project in her history class. The project required students to work together on a presentation about civil rights movements. Amara had been placed in a group with Chelsea, Blake, and 2 other students. They met twice. The first time, Chelsea smiled and said they'd take care of everything, so Amara didn't have to worry. The second time, they didn't invite her. The presentation was submitted without her name on it. When Amara asked her teacher, Mr. Calloway, why she had received a 0, he said the group had reported she didn't participate. Amara explained she had never been told when or where to meet. Mr. Calloway said he couldn't grade based on he said, she said. He said if she had concerns, she should take it up with administration. She did. Dr. Voss thanked her for bringing it to her attention. She said she would look into it. She never did. Someone else did. On a Thursday afternoon in early March, a woman named Diane Schaffer arrived at Riverside Preparatory Academy. She was not a parent. She was not a donor. She was a compliance investigator for the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. She carried a briefcase and an authorization letter. She requested access to all records related to students with disabilities, accommodation implementation logs, and incident reports filed in the past 18 months. Dr. Voss's face remained calm. She offered coffee. She provided a conference room. She assured Ms. Schaffer that Riverside Prep took compliance very seriously. But when Ms. Schaffer opened her laptop and began cross-referencing the school's records with the complaints filed by Marcus Cole, she found something interesting. Several incident reports were missing, accommodation logs had been backdated, and one student's file, Amara Cole's, had been edited 3 times in the past 60 days. Each edit had removed a detail, a name, a date, a witness statement. Someone had been cleaning the record, and they had been sloppy. Diane Schaffer did not announce her findings. She simply requested a second meeting with Dr. Voss, this time with the school's legal counsel present. The meeting took place in the administrative conference room on a gray Wednesday afternoon. Dr. Voss sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her hands folded. The school's attorney, a man named Gerald Fisk, sat beside her with a yellow legal pad. Ms. Schaffer opened her briefcase and removed a folder. Inside were printed emails, timestamp logs, and a side-by-side comparison of Amara's accommodation file from December and the same file from March. The differences were undeniable. 3 incident reports had been removed. 2 witness statements had been replaced with summaries that softened the language. A complaint about physical obstruction in the hallway had been reclassified as a miscommunication. Ms. Schaffer placed the documents on the table and asked a single question: who authorized these edits? Dr. Voss did not flinch. She said the edits were part of routine record maintenance. She said files were updated regularly to ensure accuracy. She said it was standard procedure. Ms. Schaffer asked if the Office for Civil Rights could review the original versions. Dr. Voss said the school retained records according to policy, but older drafts were not always archived. Ms. Schaffer made a note. She thanked Dr. Voss for her time. She said she would be in touch. She left the building at 4:17 p.m. By 4:45 p.m., Dr. Voss had called an emergency meeting with her senior staff. The message was clear: contain this. The school could not afford a federal investigation. The donors would pull funding. The board would demand resignations. The media would turn it into a story about discrimination, and once that word entered the narrative, it didn't matter what the facts were. Perception was liability. Dr. Voss instructed her vice principal, Mr. Raymond Salter, to begin a quiet review of all student complaints filed in the current academic year. She told him to identify any patterns, any recurring names, any documentation that could be misinterpreted. She did not say destroy evidence. She said clarify the record. Mr. Salter understood the difference. He also understood that his job depended on making this problem disappear. Within 2 days, he had flagged 6 complaints involving Amara Cole. He had interviewed the students named in those complaints: Chelsea Harmon, Blake Tennyson, and 2 others. He had asked them to provide written statements describing their interactions with Amara. He had coached them gently on how to frame those interactions, not lies, just emphasis. He reminded them that Amara sometimes misunderstood social cues, that she sometimes seemed distant or uncooperative, that it was possible she had misinterpreted friendly teasing as hostility. The students signed their statements. Mr. Salter attached them to a memo and forwarded it to Dr. Voss with the subject line, clarification of student conduct allegations. Marcus Cole received a call from the school on a Thursday morning. Dr. Voss's assistant informed him that there had been some concerns raised about Amara's behavior in recent months. She said several students had reported that Amara had been confrontational and accusatory. She said the school took these reports seriously and wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss next steps. Marcus asked what students. The assistant said she couldn't disclose that information due to privacy concerns. Marcus asked what specific incidents. The assistant said it would all be discussed in the meeting. Marcus asked if Amara was being accused of something. The assistant said it wasn't an accusation, it was a concern, a procedural concern. Marcus hung up. He called his attorney, a woman named Felicia Grant, who had represented the Iron Brotherhood in 3 civil cases. She told him not to attend any meeting without her present. She told him to request copies of all documents referenced in the call. She told him this was retaliation. Marcus knew it already. He had filed a federal complaint. The school was filing back. The meeting took place the following Tuesday. Marcus arrived with Felicia Grant. Dr. Voss was flanked by Gerald Fisk and Mr. Salter. The conference room smelled like lemon polish and toner ink. Dr. Voss opened a folder and slid a packet across the table. Inside were the student statements. Chelsea Harmon's statement described an incident in October where Amara had snapped at her for trying to help. Blake Tennyson's statement said Amara had accused him of blocking her path when he was simply standing in the hallway. A third student, someone Amara barely knew, said she seemed angry all the time. The language was careful. The incidents were vague, but the implication was clear. Amara Cole was the problem. Felicia Grant read through the statements without speaking. Then she looked up and asked a single question. When were these statements collected? Mr. Salter answered, last week. Felicia asked why the school had waited 6 months to document these concerns. Dr. Voss said the students had only recently felt comfortable coming forward. Felicia asked if any of these students had been interviewed about incidents involving Amara before this week. Dr. Voss said she couldn't comment on prior investigations. Felicia made a note. She asked if the school had any video footage of the alleged incidents. Dr. Voss said the school's security cameras were not monitored in all areas. Felicia asked which areas were monitored. Dr. Voss said that information was proprietary. Felicia smiled. It was not a friendly smile. She said her client would be providing a formal response within 10 business days. Dr. Voss said the school looked forward to resolving this amicably. But it didn't stay amicable. Within a week, the story had leaked, not to the press, not yet, but to the parents. Someone had sent an email to the Riverside Prep Parent Association describing a situation involving a student who had filed false accusations against other students. The email didn't name Amara directly, but it described her enough. A scholarship student with accommodations who had accused multiple classmates of harassment. The email suggested the school was being pressured by outside activists to take action against innocent children. It suggested this was part of a larger agenda. The email was forwarded, it was discussed, it became a thread on the school's private Facebook group. Parents began asking questions. Why was the school allowing a student to weaponize disability protections? Why were their children being punished for trying to be inclusive? Why was this girl still enrolled if she was causing so much disruption? The language was careful, no one used slurs, no one said her name, but the message was clear. Amara Cole was a threat to their children and something needed to be done. Chelsea Harmon's mother, Linda, took it further. She attended a school board meeting in early April and requested time to speak during the public comment period. She stood at the podium and described her daughter's experience at Riverside Prep. She said Chelsea had tried to befriend a new student. She said that student had repaid her kindness with accusations. She said her daughter had been interviewed by administrators like she was a criminal. She said this was what happened when schools prioritized political correctness over the safety of their students. She did not name Amara, she didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew who she was talking about. The school board thanked her for her comments. They said they took all concerns seriously. They said they would look into it. Linda Harmon returned to her seat. She had just entered Amara's name into the public record without saying it once, and now it was there, documented, official, a concern. Amara heard about the meeting from another student, a girl named Tessa who sat behind her in biology. Tessa wasn't a friend, she wasn't cruel either, but she had felt uncomfortable enough to quietly tell Amara that people were talking. That parents were saying things, that Mrs. Harmon had made it sound like Amara was ruining lives. Amara didn't respond. She went home. She sat at the kitchen table and ate dinner with her father. Marcus asked her about school. She said it was fine. He didn't believe her. He asked if anyone had said anything to her. She said no. He asked if she wanted him to pull her out. She said no. She said she had 3 months left. She said she was going to graduate. She said she had earned it. Marcus didn't argue, but that night he made a call, not to his attorney, not to the school, to a man named Virgil Kane, the president of the Iron Brotherhood Motorcycle Club. Virgil had known Marcus for 20 years. They had served in the same Marine unit. They had ridden together across 14 states. They had buried brothers. They had stood at hospital beds. They were not a gang. They were not criminals. They were a brotherhood of men who had decided that the rules didn't protect people like them, so they protected each other. Virgil listened while Marcus explained what was happening. He listened while Marcus described the emails, the statements, the meeting, the smear campaign. He listened while Marcus said he didn't know what else to do. Virgil asked one question, "What do you need?" Marcus said, "I need them to know she's not alone." Virgil said, "Then she won't be." By mid-April, the school had noticed something. Marcus Cole's truck was no longer parked in the visitor lot during drop-off. Now there were motorcycles, 4 of them, then 6, then 10. They didn't idle near the entrance. They didn't rev engines. They simply parked, and their riders stood nearby, arms crossed, leather vests visible. They didn't speak to students. They didn't approach staff. They just watched. And when Amara walked from the parking lot to the front entrance, one of them always walked 10 feet behind her. Not close enough to hover, close enough to be seen. Dr. Voss called security. Security said the men weren't on school property, they were on the public sidewalk. Dr. Voss called the police. The police said the men weren't breaking any laws. Dr. Voss sent an email to parents assuring them that student safety was the school's top priority and that the situation was being monitored. But the motorcycles kept coming, and the parents kept asking questions. Chelsea Harmon saw them. She saw the vests. She saw the patches. She saw the way the men stood like sentries. She mentioned it to Blake. Blake mentioned it to his father. His father made a call to the county commissioner's office. Within 2 days, a sheriff's deputy had been assigned to patrol the area during school hours. The deputy parked across the street. He took notes. He ran plates, but he didn't approach because there was nothing to approach. The men weren't trespassing. They weren't threatening. They were simply present, and presence, it turned out, was enough to shift the air. The hallways felt different now. Chelsea stopped whispering. Blake stopped smirking, because they had just learned something they had never needed to know before. Some people had fathers who could hire lawyers, and some people had fathers who brought 40 men in leather. The motorcycles became a story, not the story the school wanted, but the story the town couldn't stop talking about. By late April, the local news had picked it up. A soft feature, carefully framed, Motorcycle Club presence raises questions at private school. The segment showed B-roll of the Iron Brotherhood members standing on the sidewalk, their vests visible, their arms crossed. It interviewed parents who said they felt uncomfortable and concerned for safety. It included a statement from Dr. Voss assuring the public that Riverside Preparatory Academy had a zero-tolerance policy for intimidation. The segment did not interview Marcus Cole. It did not mention Amara. It did not explain why the men were there. It simply presented the image, leather vests and a prestigious school. The implication was enough. Within days, the narrative had shifted. This was no longer about a blind girl being harassed. This was about a biker gang threatening a school. The county commissioner's office issued a statement condemning any efforts to intimidate students or staff. The sheriff's department increased patrols, and the school board scheduled an emergency session to discuss security protocols. Linda Harmon appeared at that session, so did 8 other parents. They spoke during public comment. They said their children were afraid. They said the school had become a hostile environment. They said they had paid tuition for safety, for excellence, for a community that valued education over chaos. One father, a litigation attorney, suggested the school might be liable if something happened. Another mother, a real estate developer, said she was considering withdrawing her daughter and her donation. The board listened. They thanked the parents for their input. They assured them that action would be taken. After the meeting, the board president made a call to Dr. Voss. The message was clear: fix this or we'll find someone who will. Dr. Voss understood. The school could not survive a prolonged controversy. The optics were toxic. The donors were nervous. The solution was obvious: remove the variable, not the motorcycles. They couldn't control those, but they could control Amara. On May 2nd, Marcus Cole received a certified letter from Riverside Preparatory Academy. The letter informed him that Amara's enrollment was being placed under review due to ongoing behavioral concerns and the disruption of the educational environment. The letter cited the student statements collected in March. It cited the increased security presence required due to outside factors related to Amara's family. It did the school's obligation to provide a safe learning environment for all students. It did not use the word expulsion. It used the phrase administrative leave pending review. The letter requested a meeting within 5 business days to discuss Amara's continued enrollment. It was signed by Dr. Leonard Voss and countersigned by the board president. Marcus read the letter twice. Then he called Felicia Grant. She told him what he already knew. This was retaliation, and it was escalating. She told him they could fight it, but it would take time, weeks, maybe months. Amara had 6 weeks until graduation. The school knew that. They were betting Marcus would pull her out rather than risk her losing everything. Marcus asked Amara what she wanted to do. They sat in the living room, the letter on the coffee table between them. Amara was silent for a long time. Then she said she wanted to graduate. She said she had worked for 4 years to earn that diploma. She said she wasn't going to let them take it from her. Marcus asked if she understood what staying meant. She said yes. It meant they would keep coming. It meant they would keep twisting everything she did into evidence against her. It meant she would spend the next 6 weeks walking through a building where everyone had already decided she was the problem. Marcus asked if she could handle that. Amara's hands were folded in her lap, her fingers still. She said she didn't know, but she was going to try. Marcus called Felicia. He told her to schedule the meeting. He told her to prepare a response. He told her they weren't backing down. Felicia said she would, but she warned him this was going to get worse before it got better. She was right. The meeting took place on May 9th. Marcus and Felicia sat across from Dr. Voss, Gerald Fisk, and 2 members of the school board. The conference room felt smaller this time, the air heavier. Dr. Voss opened with a prepared statement. She said the school valued Amara as a student. She said the decision to place her on administrative leave was not punitive, it was precautionary. She said the school had a responsibility to all students, and recent events had created an environment that was, in her words, untenable. Felicia interrupted. She asked Dr. Voss to clarify what recent events meant. Dr. Voss said the presence of individuals affiliated with Mr. Cole had created a security concern. Felicia asked if those individuals had broken any laws. Dr. Voss said that wasn't the point. The point was perception. The point was that parents were afraid. Felicia asked if the school had considered why those individuals were present. Dr. Voss said the school was not in a position to speculate. Felicia placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of the original incident reports, the ones that had been removed from Amara's file. She had obtained them through a FOIA request filed with the Office for Civil Rights. She asked Dr. Voss if she recognized the documents. Dr. Voss's expression did not change. She said she would need to review them with counsel. Felicia said she had already provided copies to the federal investigator. She said the investigator was now reviewing the school's entire accommodation compliance history. She said this meeting was being documented as part of a retaliation claim. Dr. Voss stood. She said the meeting was over. She said the school would provide its decision in writing within 10 business days. But the damage was done outside the conference room. While Marcus had been fighting procedural battles, the social machinery had continued to grind. Chelsea Harmon's mother had organized a parent petition. It didn't mention Amara by name. It called for a return to the values that make Riverside Prep a safe and supportive community. It called for accountability for those who bring disruption into our children's lives. It called for leadership that prioritizes students over politics. Within a week, it had 112 signatures. The petition was submitted to the school board. It was posted on the Parent Association's website. It was shared in group chats and forwarded in emails. And because it never named Amara, it was untouchable. You couldn't sue someone for calling for accountability. You couldn't file a complaint against concerned parents. The smear had become structural. It didn't need to name her. Everyone already knew who it was about. Amara felt it in the hallways, not the stairs. She had lived with those for months, but the silence. The kind of silence that happens when people stop pretending they don't see you and start pretending you're not there. Teachers stopped calling on her in class. Students stopped sitting near her in the cafeteria. The girl who used to share notes in biology started sitting 3 rows away. Tessa, the one who had warned her about the parent meeting, stopped making eye contact. When Amara asked her if something was wrong, Tessa said quietly, "My mom said I shouldn't get involved." Amara didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. Getting involved meant being associated, and being associated meant becoming a target. The adults had made it clear. Amara Cole was a liability, and if you stood too close, you became one too. Marcus saw it happening. He saw his daughter coming home silent, her backpack heavier, her shoulders tight. He saw her practicing her graduation speech at the kitchen table with a voice that sounded hollow. He asked if she wanted to quit. She said no. He asked if she needed him to do something. She said there was nothing to do. The system had closed around her. The school had framed her as the aggressor. The parents had framed her as the threat. The students had framed her as toxic. And the official record, supported all of it, because the record had been edited, because the witnesses had been coached, because the complaints had been reclassified. She was losing and she hadn't even done anything wrong. That was the trap. You didn't have to be guilty. You just had to be accused. And once the accusation was in the system, it became the truth. On May 15th, Amara received an email from the school. It was not from Dr. Voss. It was from the graduation committee. The email informed her that due to scheduling conflicts, she would not be delivering the student address at the graduation ceremony. The email said the committee had selected an alternate speaker. The email thanked her for her understanding. Amara read the email 3 times, then she closed her laptop. She did not cry. She did not call her father. She simply sat in her room and stared at the wall she couldn't see, because this was the final piece. They had taken her safety, they had taken her reputation, they had taken her witnesses, and now they were taking her voice. She would still graduate. They hadn't figured out how to take that yet, but she would do it silently in a cap and gown with her name called and nothing else. No speech, no acknowledgement, no proof that she had survived, just a diploma and a record that said she was the problem. That night Marcus sat on the porch with Virgil Kane. They didn't speak for a long time. The sun had gone down, the street was quiet. Finally, Virgil asked what Marcus wanted to do. Marcus said he didn't know anymore. He said he had done everything right. He had documented everything. He had hired a lawyer. He had filed complaints. He had followed procedure. And they had still won because they owned the procedure. They wrote the policies. They controlled the records. They decided what the truth was. Virgil took a long breath. Then he said something Marcus would remember later. He said, "You can't beat the system by playing inside it. You beat it by making them step outside." Marcus asked what that meant. Virgil said, "You'll know when it happens. And when it does, you make sure everyone sees it." But Marcus didn't know when it would happen. He didn't know if it would happen at all. All he knew was that his daughter was still going to that school every day, walking through hallways where no one spoke to her, sitting in classrooms where no one looked at her, and preparing to graduate in front of a crowd that had already decided she didn't belong. And in 2 weeks she would cross that stage. And when she did, Marcus would be there. So would the Iron Brotherhood, not because they thought it would change anything, but because Amara needed to know she wasn't alone, even if she felt like she was. Diane Schaffer returned to Riverside Preparatory Academy on May 18th. This time, she was not alone. She arrived with 2 colleagues from the Office for Civil Rights and a subpoena for all electronic records related to Amara Cole's enrollment, accommodations, and disciplinary file. The subpoena also requested access to the school's email server, specifically any correspondence involving Dr. Leonard Voss, Mr. Raymond Salter, and members of the school board between January and May of the current year. Dr. Voss's assistant called her immediately. Dr. Voss was in a budget meeting. She excused herself and walked to the administrative office. Ms. Schaffer was standing in the lobby with a leather briefcase and a calm expression. She handed Dr. Voss the subpoena. Dr. Voss read it without speaking. Then she called Gerald Fisk. Fisk arrived within 20 minutes. He reviewed the subpoena. He asked Ms. Schaffer if this could wait until after graduation. Ms. Schaffer said no. She said the investigation had been escalated due to evidence of record tampering and retaliation. She said the school had 5 business days to comply. Fisk said the school would cooperate fully. Ms. Schaffer said she expected nothing less. She left her card on the reception desk and walked out. Dr. Voss stood in the lobby for a long moment. Then she returned to her office and locked the door. The investigation moved quickly. Within 3 days, the OCR team had accessed the school's server and recovered deleted emails. The emails told a story. In February, after Marcus Cole had filed his initial complaint, Dr. Voss had sent a message to Mr. Salter with the subject line, "Cole's situation needs strategy." The message instructed Salter to review all related files for inconsistencies and ensure documentation reflects institutional compliance. In March, after the first OCR inquiry, Voss had emailed the school board president, "We need to manage the narrative before this becomes a public relations issue." In April, after the motorcycles began appearing, Voss had sent a message to Linda Harmon, not to her school board email, but to her personal address with a draft of the parent petition attached. The subject line read, "Thoughts." Linda Harmon had replied, "Perfect, I'll circulate." The emails were time-stamped. They were archived. They were recoverable, and they proved coordination between the administration and the parents who had publicly claimed to be acting independently. But the emails weren't the most damaging evidence. The most damaging evidence came from the school's own surveillance system. Riverside Prep had security cameras in every major hallway, the cafeteria, and the main entrances. Dr. Voss had told Felicia Grant that the cameras were not monitored in all areas. That was true, but they were recorded, and the recordings were stored on a server that was subject to the subpoena. The OCR team requested footage from October through April, specifically from incidents cited in the student statements. The school's IT director complied. He provided digital files organized by date and location. Ms. Schaffer and her team spent 2 days reviewing the footage. What they found was not what the student statements had described. The October incident, where Chelsea Harmon claimed Amara had snapped at her for trying to help, showed Chelsea deliberately placing a textbook out of Amara's reach, then laughing when Amara's hand missed it. The hallway incident, where Blake Tennyson claimed he was simply standing, showed Blake stepping directly into Amara's path, forcing her to stop, then stepping aside at the last second while his friends filmed it on their phones. The footage was clear, the timestamps were exact. And none of it matched the statements the students had signed. Felicia Grant received a call from Ms. Schaffer on May 22nd. Ms. Schaffer asked if Felicia could meet in person. They met at a coffee shop 15 minutes from the school. Ms. Schaffer did not waste time. She said the investigation had uncovered evidence of systemic misconduct. She said the school had violated multiple provisions of the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. She said the evidence included falsified records, coordinated retaliation, and suppression of complaints. She said the Office for Civil Rights would be recommending sanctions, which could include loss of federal funding, mandatory audits, and referral to the Department of Justice for further action. Felicia asked what that meant for Amara. Ms. Schaffer said Amara's case was now being treated as the lead example in a broader compliance failure. She said the school would be required to provide remedies, including but not limited to reinstatement of all accommodations, expungement of false statements from her record, and a formal public apology. Felicia asked when. Ms. Schaffer said soon, but she also said something else. She said the school was going to fight. She said they would claim the investigation was politically motivated. She said they would argue that the emails were taken out of context and that the surveillance footage didn't prove intent. She said it would take months, maybe years, to force compliance through legal channels. Felicia asked if there was another way. Ms. Schaffer smiled. She said there was always another way. She said sometimes the best leverage wasn't a court order, it was a spotlight. Marcus Cole received a different kind of call that same afternoon. The call came from a man named David Ortiz, an investigative journalist with the regional NBC affiliate. Ortiz said he had been following the story. He said a source had provided him with documents related to the OCR investigation. He said he wanted to do a segment. Marcus asked what kind of segment. Ortiz said the kind that asks questions people don't want to answer. He said he wanted to interview Marcus. He wanted to interview Amara if she was willing. He wanted to film outside the school. He wanted to request a statement from Dr. Voss on camera. He said the story would air the week of graduation. Marcus asked why Ortiz cared. Ortiz said his daughter had cerebral palsy. He said she had been denied accommodations at a charter school 3 years ago. He said the school had blamed her for being disruptive. He said he knew exactly what was happening to Amara. And he wanted to make sure everyone else did too. Marcus said he'd talk to his daughter. Ortiz said he'd wait for her answer. Amara said yes, not because she wanted to be on television, not because she thought it would change anything, but because she was tired of being silent while other people told her story. The interview was scheduled for May 24th. It took place in Marcus's living room. Ortiz asked simple questions. He asked Amara to describe her experience at Riverside Prep. She described the missing accommodations, the moved textbooks, the group project she was excluded from. The speech that was taken away, she described it calmly without anger because anger would be used against her. Ortiz asked her what she wanted. She said she wanted to graduate. She said she wanted people to know she had earned it. Ortiz asked her father what he wanted. Marcus said he wanted the people who did this to be held accountable, not just for Amara, for every kid who got erased because the system decided they were inconvenient. The interview lasted 30 minutes. Ortiz thanked them. He said the segment would air on May 29th, 3 days before graduation. Dr. Voss learned about the interview on May 25th. A parent had seen a promo for the segment on the evening news. The promo showed footage of Amara's white cane, a shot of Riverside Prep's front entrance, and a voiceover. A blind student says she was targeted. A school says she's lying. We have the receipts. Dr. Voss called an emergency meeting with the school board. She said the interview was defamatory. She said it was biased. She said it was an attempt to pressure the school into settling a frivolous lawsuit. The board president asked if the claims in the interview were false. Dr. Voss hesitated. She said the situation was more complex than a news segment could capture. The board president asked if the school had altered Amara's records. Dr. Voss said the records had been updated in accordance with procedure. The board president asked if the school had coordinated with parents to pressure Amara's family. Dr. Voss said she had responded to parent concerns as any administrator would. The board president leaned back in his chair. He said the school's liability insurer had been contacted by the OCR. He said the insurer was threatening to pull coverage if the school did not demonstrate good faith compliance. He said the donors were already asking questions. He said the segment was going to air in 4 days, and if it showed what the promo suggested, the school would be facing a public relations catastrophe. He asked Dr. Voss what she planned to do. Dr. Voss said she would consult with legal counsel. The board president said she had 48 hours. But the clock had already run out. On May 27th, 2 days before the segment aired, the local chapter of the NAACP issued a statement. The statement called for an independent investigation into Riverside Preparatory Academy's treatment of minority students with disabilities. The statement cited Amara's case as an example of systemic discrimination. The statement was signed by the chapter president and co-signed by 3 civil rights organizations. It was sent to the school board, the county commission, and every major media outlet in the region. The story was no longer contained. It had escaped the procedural machinery and entered the public square. And once it was there, the school couldn't bury it with edited records or coach statements. The public didn't care about procedure. They cared about what they could see. And what they were about to see was a blind black girl who had been silenced, smeared, and nearly expelled for asking to be treated fairly. The segment aired on May 29th at 6:00 p.m. It ran for 8 minutes. It included the interview with Amara and Marcus. It included excerpts from the OCR findings. It included footage of the motorcycles outside the school, with a voiceover explaining that they were there because the school had failed to protect a student. And it included a moment that would be replayed across social media for the next 72 hours, a clip of David Ortiz standing outside Riverside Prep with a microphone, asking Dr. Voss on camera if she had edited Amara's records. Dr. Voss had said no comment and walked back into the building, but the camera had caught her face, and her face had said everything. The response was immediate. By 8:00 p.m., the segment had been shared over 10,000 times. By midnight, it was trending on regional Twitter. By the next morning, 3 school board members had received calls from the county attorney's office. By noon, the school's main phone line was overwhelmed with calls from parents demanding answers, alumni threatening to pull donations, and reporters requesting interviews. Dr. Voss's office door remained closed all day. At 4:00 p.m., the school board issued a statement. The statement said the board took the allegations seriously and was conducting a full review. The statement said Dr. Voss had been placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of that review. The statement said Amara Cole's enrollment would not be affected and that she would participate fully in the graduation ceremony. The statement did not apologize. It did not admit wrongdoing, but it also didn't deny anything. And in the language of institutional liability, silence was the loudest confession. Chelsea Harmon's mother called an attorney that night. Blake Tennyson's father deleted the parent petition from the school's website. Mr. Salter submitted his resignation effective immediately. And Amara Cole, sitting in her living room with her father, received a call from the school's interim administrator. The administrator said Amara's speech would be reinstated. She said the school wanted to move forward in a spirit of healing. She said she hoped Amara would accept. Amara asked if the decision was optional. The administrator paused. Then she said no, it was not optional. It was a corrective action required by federal investigators. Amara said she understood. She said she would deliver the speech. The administrator thanked her and ended the call. Marcus asked his daughter if she was ready. Amara said she didn't know, but she had 3 days to figure it out, and in 3 days she would walk across that stage. And this time, when she spoke, people would have to listen. Graduation day arrived under a sky that threatened rain but never delivered. The ceremony was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. By 8:30, the parking lot was full. Parents arrived in sedans and SUVs carrying flowers and cameras. Teachers arrived in business casual carrying programs and clipboards. The graduates arrived in caps and gowns, adjusting tassels and checking phones. And in the back corner of the lot, near the perimeter fence, 40 motorcycles arrived in formation. They parked in 2 neat rows. The riders dismounted, adjusted their vests, and walked toward the gymnasium entrance. They did not speak. They did not need to. The leather, the patches, the synchronized movement, it said everything. Marcus Cole walked at the front. Virgil Kane walked beside him. Behind them, the Iron Brotherhood moved like a unit. They were not here to disrupt. They were here to witness, and everyone knew the difference. Inside the gymnasium, the tension was surgical. The graduating class sat in rows facing the stage. Parents filled the bleachers. Faculty lined the walls. The interim administrator, a woman named Dr. Lillian Hayes, stood at the podium reviewing her notes. She had been appointed 48 hours earlier. She had no history with the school. She had no loyalty to Dr. Voss. She had been brought in to contain the damage, and she understood that containment required one thing: visibility. No more quiet edits, no more private resolutions. Everything that happened today would be public, recorded, and impossible to deny. The local news had sent a camera crew. David Ortiz was seated in the press section with a notepad. The OCR had sent an observer, a woman in a gray suit who sat in the back row with a tablet. And somewhere in the crowd, parents who had signed the petition sat silent, their phones turned off, their faces carefully neutral, because the spotlight had arrived. And no one wanted to be caught in it. At 9:50, the procession began. The graduates filed in from the side entrance, moving in alphabetical order. Amara was near the middle. She walked with her white cane folded, one hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the student in front of her. Her cap sat straight, her gown was pressed, her face was calm. She did not look at the crowd, she didn't need to, she could hear them, the shuffle of feet, the murmur of voices, the camera shutters. And beneath it all, a silence that felt like held breath. She took her seat, the row settled. The interim administrator stepped to the microphone. She welcomed the families. She congratulated the graduates. She did not mention the investigation. She did not mention the news segment. She did not mention the motorcycles in the parking lot, but everyone was thinking about them, and that was the point. The ceremony proceeded according to program. The valedictorian spoke about resilience and growth. The salutatorian spoke about community and gratitude. Then Dr. Hayes returned to the microphone. She said the next speaker was a student who had demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of adversity. She said the school was honored to have her. She said her name, Amara Cole. The applause was uneven. Some clapped loudly, some clapped politely, some did not clap at all. Amara stood. The girl beside her touched her arm briefly, a small gesture of solidarity. Amara walked toward the stage. Her cane tapped twice against the floor, finding the steps. She climbed, she crossed the stage, she stood at the podium. The microphone was adjusted, the room went quiet, and Amara began to speak. She did not start with anger, she started with a question. She asked the audience what it meant to belong. She said she had spent 4 years trying to answer that question. She said she had been told that belonging required accommodation, that it required policy and procedure, that it required paperwork, but she had learned something else. She had learned that paperwork could be edited, that policy could be ignored, that procedure could be weaponized. She said she had been told she was disruptive, that she was confrontational, that she was the problem, and for a long time she had believed it. Because when the system tells you that you're wrong and everyone around you agrees, it's hard to believe anything else. But then something happened. She said people started asking questions, not because they cared about her, though some did, but because the truth had become too loud to ignore. She said the truth was this: she had been targeted, not because she was difficult, but because she was inconvenient. Because her presence required effort, because her voice required listening, and the system had decided that was too much to ask. She paused, the room was silent, even the camera crew had stopped moving. Amara continued. She said she was not here to name names, she was not here to demand apologies, she was here to say one thing: she had survived. And survival was not the same as justice, but it was the beginning of it. She said justice was not a moment, it was a process. It required documentation, it required witnesses, it required people who refused to look away when it was easier to stay silent. She said her father had done that, she said a journalist had done that, she said a federal investigator had done that. And she said 40 men in leather vests had done that, not because they were intimidating, but because they were present, because presence was a form of protection, and protection was what the system had failed to provide. She said she was graduating today. She said she had earned it. She said no one could take that from her, not because the school had finally done the right thing, but because she had refused to let them erase her. She said she hoped the students sitting behind her would remember that. She said she hoped they would remember that policies were only as strong as the people who enforced them, that records could be changed by the people who controlled them, that silence was a weapon and so was noise. She said she didn't know what came next, but she knew this: the people who had tried to bury her story were now being investigated. The people who had edited her file were now being audited. The people who had smeared her name were now facing consequences. And that wasn't revenge, that was accountability. And accountability, she said, was the only justice that mattered. She thanked the audience. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause started slowly, then built. It was not universal, but it was loud. The Iron Brotherhood stood in unison, their hands clapping in rhythm. Marcus Cole's face was tight, his eyes wet. Virgil Kane nodded once. The graduates behind Amara stood one by one until the entire row was on its feet, then the row behind them, then the section. The applause continued for 43 seconds. Amara walked off the stage, her cane tapping, her shoulders straight. She returned to her seat. The girl beside her squeezed her hand. The ceremony continued. But the unraveling had already begun. Within an hour of the ceremony's end, the local news aired a follow-up segment. The segment included clips of Amara's speech. It included a statement from the Office for Civil Rights confirming that Riverside Preparatory Academy was under formal investigation for civil rights violations. It included an interview with Felicia Grant, who said her client was considering a federal lawsuit. It included a statement from the NAACP calling for Dr. Leaner Voss to be permanently removed from her position and for the school to undergo a full civil rights audit. And it included something else, a leaked email. The email was from Linda Harmon to Dr. Voss, dated April 10th, 2 weeks before the parent petition was circulated. The subject line read, "Draft language for community response." The body of the email contained the exact text that would later appear in the petition. The email proved coordination, it proved intent, and it proved that the grassroots parent movement had been orchestrated by the administration. The segment ended with David Ortiz standing outside the school asking a simple question: if this is how Riverside Prep treats one student, how many others have been silenced? By the end of the week, the answers started coming. 3 former students contacted Felicia Grant's office. All 3 were students with disabilities. All 3 described similar patterns: missing accommodations, altered records, retaliation for complaints. One was a student with dyslexia who had been told her learning plan was not feasible. Another was a student with autism who had been placed on behavioral probation after requesting sensory accommodations. The third was a student with a mobility impairment who had been denied access to facilities and told the school wasn't designed for wheelchairs. Their stories were different, but the structure was identical. The system had failed them, and when they had asked for help, the system had punished them. Felicia filed a class action complaint with the Department of Justice. The complaint named Riverside Preparatory Academy, Dr. Leaner Voss, and the school board as defendants. It requested a full institutional audit, mandatory civil rights training, and financial remedies for all affected students. The school board met in closed session on June 8th. The meeting lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the board issued a statement. The statement announced the immediate termination of Dr. Leaner Voss's employment. The statement announced the resignation of 3 board members, including the board president. The statement announced the hiring of an independent compliance officer to oversee all disability services. The statement announced a formal apology to Amara Cole and a commitment to remediate all affected students. The statement did not admit legal liability. The lawyers had insisted on that, but it admitted institutional failure. And in the language of public accountability, that was enough. Dr. Voss did not release a statement. Her attorney did. The attorney said Dr. Voss had acted in accordance with school policy and that any suggestion otherwise was defamatory. The attorney said Dr. Voss intended to pursue all available legal remedies, but no lawsuit was ever filed because the emails existed, the surveillance footage existed, and the federal government had already made its findings. Voss had lost, not in a courtroom, but in the record, and the record, it turned out, was everything. Chelsea Harmon and Blake Tennyson graduated without incident, but their names appeared in the OCR report as Student A and Student B, witnesses who had provided false statements in coordination with school officials. The report did not recommend charges, but it recommended that their statements be expunged and that they be required to participate in restorative justice training. Chelsea's mother withdrew her daughter's college deposit and enrolled her in a different school. Blake's father quietly stepped down from his position on the County Planning Commission. Neither family spoke to the press. Neither family apologized, but they also never spoke Amara's name again, because they understood now what Marcus Cole had understood all along. Some battles are won not by force, but by making your opponent reveal who they really are, and once the world sees it, they can't unsee it. By mid-June, the investigation had expanded. The State Board of Education launched a review of all private schools receiving state funding. The Department of Justice opened investigations into 2 other schools with similar complaints. Riverside Preparatory Academy's enrollment dropped by 18%. 3 major donors pulled funding. The school's accreditation was placed under review. And the interim administrator, Dr. Hayes, announced that the school would be implementing a new policy. All accommodation requests would be handled by an independent third party. All incident reports would be reviewed by an external auditor, and all disciplinary actions involving students with disabilities would require documentation reviewed by legal counsel. The policy was named after Amara. It was called the Cole Protocol. And it would remain in place, enforceable and auditable, for as long as the school existed. 3 months after graduation, Amara Cole enrolled at the state university. She chose a major in public policy. She said she wanted to understand the systems that had tried to erase her. She wanted to learn how they were built, how they failed, and how they could be changed. Her father helped her move into the dorm. He carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs. He met her roommate, a pre-med student from across the state who asked thoughtful questions about accessibility and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. Marcus shook her hand and told her to call if Amara ever needed anything. The roommate said she would. Marcus believed her. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter. She was unpacking books, her fingers tracing spines to read the braille labels she had added. She looked calm. She looked ready. He asked if she was okay. She said yes, not because everything was fixed, but because she had learned something. She had learned that survival was not weakness, that speaking up was not disruption, that asking for what you deserved was not entitlement. She had learned that the system could be beaten not by working within it, but by forcing it to show its hand, and once it did, the rest was just procedure. Marcus drove home alone. The highway stretched long and empty. He thought about the past year, the meetings, the emails, the lawyers. The nights Amara had come home silent and he hadn't known how to help her. He thought about the moment he had called Virgil and asked for 40 men to stand on a sidewalk. He had not known if it would work. He had only known that his daughter needed to see that she was not alone. And she had. The Iron Brotherhood had not thrown a punch. They had not made a threat. They had simply been present, and presence, it turned out, was enough to shift the gravity of a room. enough to make administrators nervous, enough to make parents ask questions, enough to remind the powerful that not everyone could be silenced with paperwork. Virgil called him that night. He asked how the move went. Marcus said it went well. Virgil asked if Amara was good. Marcus said she was better than good. She was free, not because the school had apologized. They hadn't, not really. Not because justice had been perfect, it never was, but because the record had been corrected, because the people who had tried to bury her had been exposed, because the policy that bore her name would protect other students. Virgil said that was enough. Marcus agreed. It was enough. At Riverside Preparatory Academy, the fall semester began under new leadership. Dr. Lillian Hayes remained as principal. The Cole Protocol was in effect. Accommodation requests were processed within 5 business days. Incident reports were reviewed by an independent auditor. No student with a disability had filed a complaint in 3 months. The changes were procedural. They were not emotional. The school had not become kinder. It had simply become accountable. And accountability, enforced and documented, was more reliable than kindness. The parents who had signed the petition no longer spoke about it. The students who had harassed Amara had graduated and moved on. The teachers who had looked away were still teaching, but now they had oversight. The system had not been dismantled, but it had been forced to function. And that, in the end, was what justice looked like, not transformation, correction. Amara did not think about Riverside Prep often. She thought about her classes. She thought about the advocacy group she had joined on campus. She thought about the scholarship she had applied for, one designed for students who had overcome systemic barriers. She thought about the future, not the one that had been stolen from her, but the one she was building now. A future where her voice mattered, where her presence was not a problem. Where the doors opened because she had earned the right to walk through them, and because the system had finally been forced to let her. On a Saturday morning in late September, Marcus received a letter. It was from the Department of Justice. The letter informed him that the investigation into Riverside Preparatory Academy had been concluded. The letter said the school had entered into a consent decree requiring ongoing compliance monitoring for 5 years. The letter said restitution had been awarded to affected students. The letter thanked him for his cooperation. Marcus read it twice. Then he placed it in the folder on his kitchen table, the one labeled Record. He closed the folder. He did not need to open it again. The case was over. The record was final. And his daughter was free. This story was built on procedure, documentation, and the refusal to be silent. Justice was not a miracle, it was a process, and the process worked because people refused to look away.